cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home. No one had seen the couple for days, and authorities say they had been dead for some time.
Gene Hackman's death became fuel for one of the most grotesque YouTube misinformation campaigns in recent memory, and what it reveals about the content machine that feeds on tragedy. In early 2025, Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found dead in their Santa Fe home. Within weeks, a YouTube video from a channel called The Ultimate Discovery, claiming investigators had discovered a secret tunnel beneath the property, allegedly containing DNA evidence and hundreds of bodies, had racked up nearly 1 million views. The story was completely, verifiably, unequivocally false. But by the time fact-checkers caught up, the damage was already done. The lie had traveled around the world, while the truth was still putting on its shoes. So today, we're not going to spread that lie any further. Instead, we're going to tell you the real story, because the truth of what happened inside that Santa Fe home is far more haunting, far more human, and far more important than any fabricated tunnel ever could be. Let's start with the man himself. Eugene Allen Hackman was born on January 30th, 1930, in San Bernardino, California. His path to becoming one of the greatest actors in American cinema history was anything but predetermined. He left home at 16 years old, and he was done. He enlisted in the Marines, served for 5 years, and found himself caught up in the Korean conflict before he'd even figured out who he was. It wasn't until 1956 that Hackman began pursuing acting. He enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse in California, where he struck up a friendship with another unknown hopeful named Dustin Hoffman. The two of them were already outsiders among their classmates. And if you want to know how the entertainment industry identifies talent, consider this. Hackman and Hoffman were voted the least likely to succeed. Hackman himself received the lowest score the Pasadena Playhouse had ever given a student. Let that sink in for a moment. The lowest score ever given. To a man who would go on to win 2 Academy Awards, 2 British Academy Film Awards, 4 Golden Globes, and a Silver Bear. A man who would accumulate 98 acting credits across a career spanning more than 4 decades. A man who would become a paragon of the new Hollywood movement, redefining what American acting could look like on screen. His first credited film role came in 1964, a movie called Lilith. 3 years later, he earned his first Oscar nomination for Bonnie and Clyde. By 1971, he'd won Best Actor for The French Connection, one of those performances that doesn't just win awards, but permanently alters the landscape of cinema. 2 decades later, in 1992, he took home Best Supporting Actor for Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's revisionist Western masterpiece. In 2001, he earned a Golden Globe for The Royal Tenenbaums. And then, in 2004, after a film called Welcome to Mooseport, Gene Hackman quietly walked away from Hollywood. He didn't make a spectacle of his retirement. He didn't do a farewell tour. He simply stopped. He and his wife Betsy Arakawa, a classical pianist he'd married in 1991, settled into life in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Susan Medore, a publicist who had worked with the Hackmans for years, later testified that the couple relished living in Santa Fe because it afforded them anonymity. They wanted to be left alone. They wanted privacy. They wanted peace. For 2 decades, they had it. Then came February 2025. The timeline of what happened inside that home on Old Sunset Trail is precise, clinical, and deeply sad. Between February 8th and February 12th, Betsy Arakawa was on her computer researching medical conditions. She was looking up symptoms related to COVID-19 and flu-like illnesses. Her searches included questions about whether COVID could cause dizziness or nosebleeds. She was clearly unwell. She was trying to figure out what was wrong with her. On February 11th, according to Sheriff Adan Mendoza, there was no additional outgoing communication from her or known activity. The investigators initially believed this was likely her date of death, but a complication emerged. On March 17th, Dr. Josiah Child, who leads Cloudberry Health in New Mexico, told the Daily Mail that he received a phone call from Arakawa on February 12th. Mrs. Hackman didn't die on February 11 because she called my clinic on February 12, Child stated. Sheriff Mendoza later acknowledged the significance. That would indicate to me that she was seeking medical advice or medical help and may have not been feeling well. So somewhere around February 11th or 12th, Betsy Arakawa died. She was 65 years old. And Gene Hackman was still alive. His pacemaker, which had been installed in April of 2019, recorded every heartbeat. The data was precise. The device logged its final heartbeat on February 18th, 2025. Gene Hackman was 95 years old. For approximately 6 days after his wife died, Gene Hackman was alive in that house. A toxicology report later revealed he tested negative for alcohol and all intoxicating drugs, but that he had a low concentration of acetone in his system. That finding indicates prolonged fasting. He hadn't been eating. Whether he was unable to feed himself due to his declining health, or whether grief and confusion played a role, we may never fully know, because Gene Hackman had Alzheimer's disease. The official cause of death, announced at a March 7th news conference by Chief Medical Investigator Dr. Heather Jarrell, was heart disease, with Alzheimer's disease listed as a contributing factor. Betsy Arakawa's cause of death was hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Hantavirus, not a household name for most people, but in the American Southwest, particularly the Four Corners region, it's a known and feared killer. According to the Centers for Disease Control, the Sin Nombre strain found in this region carries a mortality rate of approximately 38 to 50%. It spreads through contact with infected rodent droppings, urine or nesting materials, from deer mice and other carriers, often when those materials are disturbed in enclosed or poorly ventilated spaces. An environmental assessment of the Hackman property, conducted by state health personnel, found rodent feces in several outbuildings on the property, along with live traps, suggesting the Hackmans were aware of rodent presence. Crucially, there was no evidence of rodent activity inside the home itself. But hantavirus doesn't require direct rodent contact. Inhaling dust contaminated with the virus can be enough. New Mexico has reported the highest number of hantavirus cases of any state, with 122 cases logged since the virus was first identified in 1993. Colorado follows with 119 cases. In 2025, New Mexico saw 7 cases, 3 of which were fatal, and one of those 3 was Betsy Arakawa. Nobody discovered any of this for 2 weeks. On February 26, 2025, at approximately 1:45 p.m., Santa Fe County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the address on Old Sunset Trail in Hyde Park. Maintenance and security workers had shown up at the home and found the partially mummified remains of both Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, along with a deceased dog. Dr. Jarrell later acknowledged the unprecedented nature of the public disclosure. It's unprecedented for the Office of the Medical Investigator to make public statements about death investigations, she said. But the public interest was too intense, the speculation too wild to remain silent. And this is where we need to talk about what happened next, because this is where the story turns from tragedy into something uglier. Within weeks of the deaths becoming public, the ultimate discovery. YouTube channel posted a video claiming that FBI investigators had found a secret tunnel beneath the Hackman property. The video alleged that this tunnel contained DNA evidence and, in its most outrageous claim, the remains of 701 bodies. 701 bodies. Beneath the home of a 95-year-old retired actor with Alzheimer's disease and his classical pianist wife. The video accumulated more than 800,000 views. It spread across X, formerly Twitter. It spread across Threads. Other YouTube channels picked it up and ran with it, each one adding their own embellishments, their own breathless narration, their own ominous music. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. If you scrolled all the way down to the description of that original video, buried at the bottom, you'd find a disclaimer. It read, and I'm quoting directly, "The content presented in our videos is intended solely for entertainment purposes. While we may draw upon facts, rumors, and fiction, viewers should not interpret any part of the content as factual or definitive information. Please enjoy responsibly. Facts, rumors, and fiction. Please enjoy responsibly, as if misinformation about a dead man and his dead wife is something to be enjoyed, as if accusing someone of being connected to 701 deaths is entertainment, as if slapping a disclaimer at the bottom of a video absolves you of the poison you've just injected into the public discourse. Snopes investigated the claim and found no evidence whatsoever to support it. No credible news outlet reported on any tunnel. No mention of any tunnel was made during the official March 7th news conference, which is available in full on YouTube for anyone who actually cares about the truth. The verdict was definitive. The story was fabricated. But nearly 1 million people watched that video. How many of them scrolled down to read the disclaimer? How many of them shared the story with friends? How many of them still believe it today? Meanwhile, a real battle over privacy and transparency was playing out in the courts, and almost nobody was paying attention to it. The estate of Gene Hackman, represented by Julia Peters, petitioned a state district court in Santa Fe to seal the autopsy and investigative records, citing the family's right to privacy in grief under the 14th Amendment. On the other side, Dr. Jarrell argued that autopsy reports were typically made public to maintain accountability. I do think it infringes on transparency if the court were to prohibit release of all the investigation records, including the autopsies, she said. Judge Matthew Williams ultimately found a middle ground. There's certainly a public interest in knowing how their deaths were investigated and knowing how that was handled, he stated. On March 31st, the court cleared the way for the release of investigative records, with the stipulation that depictions of the deceased couple would be blocked from public view. When those records were released on April 15th and 16th, they contained one detail that cut through all the noise and speculation and conspiracy theories like a knife: a stack of love notes, written by Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa to each other, found on their property during the investigation. Love notes between a husband and wife who had been married for 34 years, who had chosen to live quietly in the New Mexico desert, away from the cameras and the red carpets and the industry that had made one of them famous, who died within days of each other in the home they shared, one from a virus carried by desert rodents, the other from a failing heart and a mind that was slowly leaving him. That's the real story, not tunnels, not DNA evidence, not 701 bodies. Love notes. The Hackman case has had at least one positive consequence. Hantavirus, a disease most Americans had never heard of, suddenly drew international attention. The tragedy underscored the very real danger of enclosed, unventilated spaces in regions where rodent populations carry the virus. Researchers at the University of New Mexico subsequently published findings showing that more than 30 species of rodent and other small mammals endemic to the Southwest carry hantavirus, including ground squirrels, chipmunks, gophers, rats, and even common house mice. That's far more carriers than most people realized. And the virus hasn't stopped. In 2026, a Santa Fe County man in his 60s was hospitalized with hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, the first case in New Mexico that year. He recovered. Betsy Arakawa did not. The investigators initially classified the Hackman deaths as suspicious, which generated its own wave of breathless headlines. But this was standard procedure for unattended deaths, not an indication of foul play. Sheriff Mendoza was clear. Foul play isn't suspected as a factor in those deaths at this time. The classification was protocol, not accusation. But nuance doesn't travel well on social media. Suspicious became a signal flare for conspiracy theorists, and channels like The Ultimate Discovery were only too happy to fill the vacuum with fantasy. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Gene Hackman was one of the finest actors who ever lived. He was voted least likely to succeed, and then succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. He won 2 Oscars. He redefined what it meant to be a leading man in American cinema. And when he was done, he walked away with dignity and lived quietly with the woman he loved. He died of heart disease at 95, his mind compromised by Alzheimer's, his body showing signs that he hadn't eaten in days. His wife died of a rare but very real virus days before him, after desperately searching the internet for answers about what was making her sick. Their bodies lay undiscovered for 2 weeks because they had chosen a life of privacy. And privacy, it turns out, cuts both ways. That story is tragic enough. It's human enough. It doesn't need tunnels or DNA evidence or 701 imaginary bodies to be worth telling. The next time you see a video with a title designed to make your jaw drop, with a thumbnail featuring red circles and arrows and shocked faces, ask yourself one question. Does this channel have a disclaimer at the bottom of its description telling you that everything you just watched might be fiction? Because the people who made those videos about Gene Hackman didn't care about him. They didn't care about Betsy Arakawa. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about views. They cared about the algorithm. They cared about monetization. And nearly 1 million people gave them exactly what they wanted. Gene Hackman deserved better than that. Betsy Arakawa deserved better than that. And frankly, so do you.